Hello, all of you, and welcome back to the Crafted and Carved podcast. My name is Kenny. I am so happy to be here, guys. It has been such an incredible journey to episode 11. Okay, because last week we did a two-parter, part one and part two of a series called Choosing Joy, which I hope you guys enjoyed. As I told you in the last episode, we are getting ready to officially launch this podcast. And some of you are like, what are you talking about? Officially launch? Honestly, I don't even know. It's definitely a concept that I need up. So just deal with it, right? No, I'm just kidding. But basically, these last supposedly 10 episodes, but now 11 episodes, have been my way of getting comfortable with the space, getting used to podcasting, understanding the schedule, understanding the rhythm, just the little things that come up that I, never knew would come up, beforehand. And kind of just doing a soft launch, a soft tester of exactly what I wanted this podcast to be, feel, and sound like. So if you have already been tuned in, you are ahead of the game. I'm so proud of you. I love you, and I hope you stay. But just know that there are going to be some changes coming with the official launch, which is absolutely going to be on May 1st. So that is next week, you guys. It's literally right around the corner. So this episode that you're hearing right now is actually going to be released on a Wednesday. And then every single episode after that will be released on Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Woo! Yes! We in here. Okay, I might not be the only person hyped. Like, I need you guys to get hyped. Like, we are really about to do this thing. So yes, for all of you guys who have been here, all the crafters who have been here with me, listening, whether you're just kind of listening or you're like, I don't really know, or you're loving it. I see you, I love you, I appreciate you, and I hope that you'll continue to stay with us as we grow and keep going forward. When we do a launch officially on the 1st, that will also be the start of the much anticipated relationship series. So we will be leaving this soft launch foundational series where we've just been talking about a variety of different things that can help us in our journey to understanding ourselves and unlocking our better selves and just getting to a good space where we know ourselves, we understand ourselves, and we're comfortable with who we are. And we're going to be moving into that space of now bringing in a third party, bringing in someone else into the understanding of us, which is the relationship series. So I'm so excited about that. We're going to be incorporating some interesting content as well as some guest speakers. So that'll be fun. Um, yeah, so this is the very last episode of our foundational series and the episode right before the launch. I am also very excited, as I always am, about this episode. And because I know we have to launch, I am hoping that this is also not going to turn into a two-parter. But guys, you have to understand that just like the Choosing Joy series, this one has a lot of information, and it is a really good one that may be hard. I'm gonna be honest, it might be the hardest one for some of you in terms of just digesting what I'm going to tell you in this episode, and even just understanding some of the concepts. Some of the concepts are even a little bit tricky for me, which is why I'm going to be relying on an article like last episode. I think articles are very helpful to get that right. Like if we had a expert, or I've had somebody here as a special guest, maybe that special guest would be more of an expert in the area. But when I know that I'm not an expert and this is an area that I'm still working on within myself, I am definitely humble enough to know that I need to go to get some outside information. And so that is what we're doing again with this episode, which is recognizing that you are the problem. Okay. Woo, child, let me tell you. That is a hard pill to swallow. Recognizing that you are the issue, recognizing that there just may be some things going on in your life that may either be currently happening or have happened in the past that you blamed others for. And then you get to this place in your life where you've grown and learned and you understand things a little bit better. And you say, wait a minute. Oops, it's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. Right? No, just me. So I don't know if you've been there, and if you've never been there before, man, is this going to be a fun ride? Have had some hard reflections in the last couple of months that I won't say I'm excited to share them with you guys because it's hard to open up about quote unquote failures and mistakes. But because I know how important it is to be transparent, because I hope that it will help some of you in your journey to getting to a better space and really creating that rock solid foundation that we're aiming to create in this foundational series. I'm definitely going to be opening up to you guys this episode. So definitely click like, subscribe, share all the S's and whatever that you need to do to give this episode some love because it's going to be a good one. I think the way that I want to start off this episode is just asking you guys a question. And it's the question that we're going to have to take a deep dive into. So I want you to think about it, but just know we're going to be unpacking it the whole episode. And the question is, why is it so hard for you to admit when you are wrong? Okay, just think about that. And some of you were like, "What you talking about? I'm never wrong." See, there we go. We're already we're already right on track, right, with where we should be. Because I'm never wrong. What are you talking about? Um, yeah. So why is it so hard for you to admit when you're wrong? I want us to go deep, but I also want to keep in mind the reality, right? Which is that we're here to get the nuggets and the gems that we really need to, you know, move on in life and get to where we need to get to in life. And so I'm not going to go too deep into the psychology of this one, but some of you may have heard of a term called cognitive dissonance, which I just want you to put a pin in that because we're going to be talking about it quite a bit. So if you've heard it before, just know, go into your memory bank of what is that? What does that mean again? How does that work? And we are going to really be unpacking a concept called cognitive dissonance today because I think, and so does this article that we're about to talk about, I think that cognitive dissonance is one of the biggest just blobs of we don't understand it, but also the biggest reason for why it is so hard for us to admit that we are wrong. And so does Kristen Wong, who's the author of the article with the same title called Why It's So Hard to Admit When You're Wrong. It's a New York Times article, so you know it's legit, okay? Got the New York Times. You gotta have a subscription to look at this article, y'all. Um, so Miss Wong in this article is talking about how psychologists say that cognitive dissonance is the stress we experience when we hold two contradictory thoughts, beliefs, opinions, or attitudes. So here's the example that she gives. You might believe that you are a kind and fair person. So that is the identity. You identify as this, or you have categorize yourself as a kind and fair person. So when you are rudely cut off by somebody, you experience dissonance. And so to cope with it, you will deny your mistake, right? You will deny that you rudely cut someone off and insist that it is the other driver's fault, that they should have seen you, or that you even had the right of way even when you didn't. So here's another explanation or just summary of cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is what we feel when the self concept, I'm smart, I'm kind, I'm convinced this belief is true, is threatened by evidence that we did something that was not smart, or that we were unkind and hurt someone else, or when the idea or the belief is untrue. And so this is something that I think I see all the time. Actually, it's not I think, I know I see all the time. It's something I see within myself, and it's absolutely things that I see within other people. When we have these really strong beliefs, we have these really strong ideas or identities that we attach ourselves to so strongly. When those ideas or beliefs or identities are threatened, we go into fight or flight mode, and we, typically fight so hard to prove that it's not real, or that that it is true, that the identity is still there. Um, and so in the same article, it's just talking about how in order to reduce this dissonance, we have to modify the self concept or accept the evidence. And obviously, people do not like to do that. They would rather cope by justifying their mistake, um, and or finding ways to negate others' realities, which is where you start leaning into the space of gaslighting, right? Where you are trying to warp somebody else's reality because it disagrees with your categorization, your strongly held belief, or your identity, right? Which pretty much sucks. It's gaslighting is awful. It's an awful thing to do, but obviously, if you are somebody that's on the receiving position of the gaslighting, it feels horrible. And so imagine, constantly doing that uh, subconsciously and in a more indirect way, which is usually what cognitive dissonance is, especially because a lot of times you're not actually saying that out loud to the person. You might just be telling it to yourself. So you're actually gaslighting yourself, if that's a thing. But it's not a thing. It's literally just cognitive dissonance, where you're essentially lying to yourself or continuing to perpetuate the belief or idea that you've held on to for so long, just so that that thing, that belief, that idea doesn't crumble, because the idea that that thing crumbles really, for you, for whatever means that you crumble, or that your world is falling apart, everything you are or everything you have known begins to fall apart, which is not true. But again, that's usually how we react, and it really sucks. Obviously, when you are someone who operates regularly in a space of cognitive dissonance, bad things happen as a result. You will oftentimes find yourself in broken relationships, or relationships will break down because of it, because you're just not living in a space of honesty and truth and reality. You're usually in a space of regular, or at the very least consistent, denial, self denial, denial of other people's thoughts and feelings and beliefs. And that is not good. You do not allow yourself the opportunity to grow, right? Like, you could have had a belief that you held when you were a child, and now that you're an adult, it's time to understand the world from a different perspective, but you're still stuck on, Miss Teen Prom 2007, that you cannot grow into the person and the woman that you're supposed to be in 2023. So it really stunts your ability to grow. It stunts your ability to just progress in life in general, and to blossom into who you're destined to be. And that is, that is something that is self-destructive and just really inefficient. Ultimately, your lack or ability to admit to your wrong, or admit to your share of responsibility in a particular problem or issue or mistake, because sometimes you're able to acknowledge the fact that a mistake was made, but you won't acknowledge your role, responsibility, or things that you could have done differently to prevent it from happening. And that's also very problematic. And so ultimately, when you continuously live in that space, you're just not in tune with reality. You're not in tune with yourself. You're not exhibiting an amount of self awareness that really allows you to be, someone that people can learn to trust, can learn to respect, can learn to look to as just a source of realness. You're operating on a facade, and that's not good. That's not beneficial to you, and it definitely will not be beneficial to the people around you. The only thing that it may feel in the moment is that you have this temporary shield protecting your feelings, which I totally understand, because we all are out here just trying to protect our feelings. But the reality is we are all so much stronger than we think we are. Our feelings are always fleeting, and they are usually temporary, but more importantly is they're very easily consolable. So yes, your feelings may be hurt, you may be offended, and you may be shooken up for a second when you experience this cognitive dissonance, or the reality that, maybe your belief or your identity or your thing is being threatened. But I promise you, you will recover. But the person that you affect because of your inability to live in that reality may not, right? Because, like I said, gaslighting and things like that usually stem from cognitive dissonance, and those actions and behaviors that are produced through gaslighting can sometimes end up causing, very traumatic experiences and events for other people. A lot of times you see narcissists, really living in this world of cognitive dissonance. And so you just have to be really careful. I'm not calling anybody here a narcissist by any stretch of the imagination, because I know you guys are all lovely people. Um, but if this is your wake up call that you needed to bring more awareness, more attention to where you are at in life, your mistakes, and your ability to own up to your mistakes, then this is the light bulb. I'm twisting it on for you. Be okay with making mistakes. So now I just want to talk a little bit about how you can avoid cognitive dissonance, which, look, it's really not something that is super easy to avoid. It happens, right? Um, but I think, the main thing, and what the article talks about too, the only real way to avoid cognitive dissonance is to know what cognitive dissonance is, and to catch it when it's happening, or catch it before it's happening, right? So because you know what it looks like, you also know the signs surrounding it and or leading up to it, right? And so they say in the article that, the first step, right, is to recognize cognitive dissonance in action, because your mind will go to great lengths to preserve your sense of identity. So it really is important to be aware of what the dissonance looks and feels like. So typically it can manifest as confusion, stress, embarrassment, or guilt. Those feelings don't necessarily mean that you are in the wrong, but you can at least use those feelings as reminders to explore the situation a little bit further, take on an impartial perspective, and attempt to objectively question whether you are at fault or not, instead of just defaulting to the fact that it isn't you. So basically, they're giving us a process by which we can regularly analyze each instance of when we start to feel feelings of confusion, stress, embarrassment, or guilt. So let's say, something happens, like you get into an argument with your person, your spouse, your significant other, and you start to feel confused or stressed. This doesn't actually mean that you are wrong, but it also doesn't mean that you are right. So while you're in the middle of this process and talking through the issue or the disagreement with your significant other, it is a chance for you to take a second and objectively think through whether you actually could be at fault. Even if you're not completely at fault, think about areas where you could share some of the fault for why the disagreement is occurring, instead of being so quick to heavily push the fault onto the other person and be so hell bent on making sure that they apologize for what they did to you, right? And so that's easier said than done, especially if the other person is not operating that way themselves. It is the reality of what they call being the bigger person. And if you have the right individual in your life, the right friends, and the right significant other in your life, the more that you operate in this space, then they will start to meet you there as well. But that is only if you have the right people in your life. If you're constantly, quote unquote, being the bigger person, if you're constantly, and sometimes don't get being the bigger person confused with just apologizing for the sake of ending the argument, because that's not what being the bigger person is. Being the bigger person, in my mind, and in this instance, is exactly what I just said: evaluating the situation for whether or not you can own up to any fault or responsibility that that you can identify within the particular issue, within the particular, disagreement. And if so, then you go ahead and initiate that apology, you initiate that ownership conversation of ownership with the other person on your own. But it does not mean that you just go ahead and give a fake apology and just, huff and puff it over just to be over. That's not what being the bigger person is. But like I said, if you have the right person on the other side, you are more than likely going to be able to engage in better conflict resolution and just communicate more effectively about your issues moving forward. Another thing that the article really embraces about ways you can avoid cognitive dissonance is to also learn to recognize your usual justifications and rationalizations. So, what are the things that you regularly typically cling to as your response or your negating or your denial of the mistake or the situation, the belief? What are your typical triggers, and how do you typically, rationalize them or justify them? And it asks for us to think of a time when we were wrong. So think of a time when you were wrong, right? And you knew it. And this is what I asked you guys earlier, right? So circling back to, why is it so hard for you to admit when you're wrong? And if you really were thinking about this effectively, you were trying to remember a time when you were last wrong. And I joked because I'm like, some of us are like, when have I ever been wrong? So hopefully, if you've been following along so far, you're warming up to the idea that it is okay to be wrong. You're warming up to the idea that you may not always get everything right. So I want you guys to really sit with this one also for a second and think of a time when you were wrong, and either you knew it in the moment or you recognized it later on. But instead, right, in the moment, you tried to justify it. So I want you guys to remember how it felt, right, to rationalize that behavior and really pinpoint those feelings. Okay. What were the feelings that were associated with rationalizing that behavior? Did it feel comforting? Did it feel like it was putting a band-aid on the wound that somebody was trying to expose? Did it feel like when you rationalized and justified that you felt strong, you felt secure, you felt confident? What was that feeling like, right? And I need you to pinpoint that as cognitive dissonance the next time that it happens, right? So the next time that you make a rationalization, you build yourself up to feel good, strong, confident, capable. Again, Not always meaning that you're in the wrong, but just allowing yourself to embrace the fact that this is cognitive dissonance, and because you haven't taken the time to really evaluate the fault or even the possibility that there could be some shared fault. And the biggest thing you can always do is to understand that people are oftentimes more forgiving and understanding than we realize, right? Traits like honesty and humility make us more human and therefore way more relatable. And so I guess the flip side of that, right, is that if it is undeniably clear that you are wrong, when you refuse to apologize, it actually reveals that you have low self confidence and that your confidence is solely resting upon you're hanging on by a thread to whatever that identity is or that core belief is that's being threatened so hard. It actually reveals that you have low self-esteem, because self-confidence and self-esteem is actually the combination, the makeup of multiple things. We talk about that in one of our episodes, I can't remember which episode it is, but earlier in this foundational series, and how self esteem is something that we build as a combination of a variety of different factors in our lives, in ways that we pour into ourselves in multiple different areas of our lives and characteristics of who we are. And so, if your entire identity is threatened by this one idea or belief not being correct or true, then it actually shows that your self esteem, your self confidence is much lower than you're trying to make it seem like it is, which, you know. Um, so that's actually, if anything, if you were just like, I don't need this, the takeaway from this entire article, right, is that cognitive dissonance and your inability to own up to your mistakes, the inability to recognize those mistakes and really sink your teeth into the truth and accept the truth for what it is genuinely exposing a weakness in your character rather than a strength. And so even if you are peppering, the situation with all of these rationalizations that make you feel strong, that make you feel confident, that make you feel amazing, the reality is you're actually exposing a weakness that people are going to pick up on rather than a strength. And that sucks because you're actually doing the opposite of what you're intending to do. And people will remember that about you. People will remember that, in a moment, in an opportunity where you had the chance to show up in an authentic way, you chose the the route of weakness instead. So just keep all of that in mind. I'm not here to, make you feel horrible about yourself if you operate in cognitive dissonance on a regular basis, but just letting you know that you do have a choice, okay? You can still protect yourself, love on yourself, and give your feelings a safe space to exist while still operating in truth, while still giving yourself space to grow, room to be wrong, and room to accept that sometimes you are the problem, okay? Okay? So, one of the things that I wanted to, kind of go back and take a deeper look into is how all of this fits into, our interactions with other people, our dynamics with other individuals in our lives. And there's a quote from the article that says, so for example, oh, well, they're talking about the importance of an apology. And so I guess that's probably the next kind of section that I want to focus on is how to, what do you do instead of cognitive dissonance, right? So instead of justifying and rationalizing, what do we do instead? So the example is that apologizing to my wife admits my wrongdoing, right? But also apologizing to her gives her the power to choose whether she wants to alleviate my shame through forgiveness or increase my shame by holding a grudge, right? So then it puts the responsibility back on her, and she gets to choose to be weak or strong. And the research has found that people often experience a short-term increase in their feelings of personal power and control after refusing to apologize, which again is exposing a weakness because you're in a space where you feel like you need to increase your personal power and control through this one little microcosm And instead of just embracing, the power and the control that you have as a human being in general, in the space of autonomy, and in just your entire being and being alive and being your own person, right? You have power, but it's the fact that you need to feel that, right? Because sometimes the reality is that you already have the power, but you don't feel it. And that's where the self-esteem comes into play, that you don't really feel it. You can't embrace it unless you belittle someone else, unless you overpower this person by refusing to apologize, which sucks. And it just talks again about how apologies do give power to their recipients. And we should kind of lean into the reality that we want to give that to the people we care about. We want to give the people we care about power as well. We are also empowered, but we can also empower the people in our lives as well. And the last quote says that we cling to old ways of doing things, even when new ways are better and healthier and smarter. We cling to self defeating beliefs long past their shelf life. And we make our partners, co workers, parents, and kids really, really mad at us. Just mic drop, period. Like, nothing super deep there. But we have the tendency to really hurt and anger some people we really care about, simply because we want to cling on to old ways, old thought patterns, old habits, even when there are better, healthier, and smarter ways that have been presented to us. And we won't even give them the chance, we won't even give them an opportunity. And these self defeating beliefs, right? So we are defeating ourselves by clinging to these things. These self defeating beliefs not only have been in our lives long past their expiration date, but they are harming and poisoning us. Like, think of the expired item on the shelf. We're feeding it to our families, our parents, our coworkers, and our kids, and it's poisoning them, right? So, I enough about that analogy, guys. Just understand the power of an apology is much greater than, the the short term increase in power that we give to ourselves when we refuse to apologize. And I think that when you really do care about people, or you even just care about your experience, so maybe you hate your boss, but you care about the ability to have a good job. You care about the ability to make a difference if you're in that type of role. So apologizing, owning up to your mistakes, and really sitting in your truth in terms of a mistake is extremely important and extremely valuable. So I already kind of started to give you guys a little bit of an insight into my own personal life and situations without saying it, super clearly. But I definitely wanted to take some time to get, bring you guys into my world, and hopefully you do not feel alone or siloed if some of these cognitive dissonance things kind of feel relatable, or feel like, okay, wait, I do this every day. And even if you don't do this every day and you do it some of the time, or not all of the time, but a little bit of the time, I just wanted to share some just areas in my life where I really had to work on this and address this. And not just because I don't want you to feel alone, but also because maybe you are thinking that this doesn't apply to you. But let me tell you why 9 times out of 10 we all do it. So I am in a relatively new-ish relationship. Most of you guys know I have been dating an incredible individual for a little over 6 months now, right? And we're in that phase and stage in our relationship where it's still very happy. There's still a lot of blissful and exciting moments, but now we're trying to work through a lot of interesting terrains, right? Because we're not in that butterfly stage anymore. And some people, don't get me wrong, you guys are in butterfly stage for the first 2 years, and I love that for you. But, I'm the type of person, it's not that I move fast, but I move deep pretty quickly. And so I don't tend to stay at a surface level for very long. So, yes, at 6 months, we are already starting to work through some interesting terrains. And a lot of those terrains I have to be honest, and this is not to excuse his reality, right? But I'm really big on taking ownership of what I can do to, just what is my role in this, who am I? How do I address what Kenni is doing? How do I address what Kenni is bringing and or not bringing to this situation? Um, and so I will say honestly that I think a lot of our disagreements have been circumvented around some of my own kind of issues, right, with my past. One of the biggest being that, I was in a really extremely toxic relationship, which I have shared with you guys. In the past. It was full of all sorts of toxic things, you name it. It's a long laundry list of just nonsense, from cheating to, lying to stealing to physical violence. It was very chaotic. And because of that, obviously, I took some time to heal. I went to therapy, I did all the things, right? I did all the things. But the reality is, you don't always know exactly what you're about to enter into in terms of, who am I now? Because I've been working so much on myself as an individual in the space of me being single that I don't actually know what it looks like in a relationship context yet. So a lot of things started to come out, right? A lot of feelings and just whatever's came out that I wasn't prepared for, right? Because one of the things that I'm so big on is I don't want to go back to that scenario from the past. I know that you're not this person, but I don't even want any of it. Like, I don't want even a little bit of this stuff from the past. So when I see you doing this, saying this, or acting like this, and it triggers, little memories of my past, I'm going to call it out and I'm going to tell you what it is. And I'm going to let you know that you're not about to, da da da, And don't get me wrong, that was not my presentation at all. But I definitely noticed that I was regularly bringing to him issues and problems and honestly causing arguments that really just didn't need to be caused because I was regularly trying to constantly check him and overanalyze his actions based on the past. Ladies, I am not going to sit here and tell you that assessing a man's that you're currently getting to know's actions based on what you've learned from the past relationship is wrong. That is not what I'm saying. But what I'm about to tell you is that I was the one who was in the wrong, okay? I was in the wrong. And it wasn't because I shouldn't have brought these things to his attention. But there is absolutely a way. And it wasn't just about presentation, it was a way to bring things to your man so that you are really coming from a place of, I want to understand this because I want to make sure that your actions are being done in a manner that I can get with because I don't understand this and I don't want to get hurt. There's definitely a way to do it. And I was definitely coming from a place of, you can't do this to me, or I'm not putting up with that, or, you need to stop doing this, or you don't actually care about me because you did X, Y, and Z, and I think there's a way to address it, which we will get into when we really talk about, relationships and dating and all of that. But the point I'm trying to make is that in the beginning stages of the relationship, I was so hell bent on protecting myself and protecting my heart that I was not allowing myself to be open to the reality that, first of all, it might be me. I was like, you need to apologize to me. You need to do things different. You can't do things like this. And it was really me. Like, I was the problem. I was the problem in the way that I addressed, my misunderstandings or my lack of understandings and clarity of his actions. And I was the problem in the sense that I am the one who is struggling with a particular trigger, right? And it is my responsibility to be aware of those triggers and also communicate them effectively to my partner. And I wasn't doing that. And that's just the reality. I wasn't doing that. And he didn't need to tell me that. In fact, he never told me this information. If you're wondering, right? I came to this conclusion on my own that I was bringing a lot of the chaos, in terms of our early disagreements. Trust me, we still have disagreements, but they look a lot different now. But in terms of the early disagreements and the early issues that we were experiencing, it was definitely me. And I really had to check myself and understand, why I was doing it. And it was because I was constantly in fight or flight mode, right? Justifiably so because of the toxic relationship. Um, but if I've really and fully truly healed, I don't have to be in fight or flight mode with this man, right? This is a good man. This is a different man. This is a loving man. And I had already identified that. So I can also say that, ladies, if that is something that you have not been able to see yet in your man, then none of this applies to you. But once you have already identified that this is a different man, this is a good man, this is a loving man, this is a God fearing man, this is a man who really values me, this is a man who's really core goal is to protect me, but now we're just trying to figure out how. We're in the how stage. All the other pieces are there, but how to get it done, how to make sure we're both meeting the goals that we have set for the relationship and have set for each other. And a lot of times that is very incongruent and all over the place. Okay, so anyway, um, yes, I was definitely in a space of cognitive dissonance, constantly rationalizing my behaviors because I needed to protect myself. I wanted to protect my feelings. And I completely ignored the reality that here is this amazing man in my life that wants to do the exact same thing, who wants to love me and also protect my feelings. And all I had to do is come to him in a manner that is respectful, that is, you know, um, from a place of wanting to understand and have an adult conversation. So that's that about relationships, and my life with my relationships. But another thing that I wanted to let you guys have a little peek into is just my experiences in a chaotic work environment, because I also experienced that as well. And so I don't really want to go too deep into that because I'm also going to have an episode coming up later on about career, where I will really dive into my experiences with my previous employer and, just the really toxic work environment that I was in at the time when I was working there. But I want you guys to understand this is even with all of that, um, I didn't even have a standard for which I was going to hold myself to in that space. It was chaotic, but I needed to have a constant. I needed to have a a baseline of behavior, of conduct, of which I was going to carry myself in response to their toxicity and their chaotic structure. And because I didn't have that, there were moments where I was not at my best, that I did not live up to what I knew, to what I knew I needed to do, but also to who I know that I am. And because of that, I was regularly, it's blaming everything on them. And to be perfectly clear with you guys, 90% of it was them. But I refused to even accept the 10% that was me for a very, very long time. And it made it very difficult for me to even embrace, any changes or any improvements that I could have made, any growth that I could have gained, not just from the work itself, but the experience of going through that really difficult environment and no longer, working there. And so that's another thing, like I blame them up and down, right? And anybody who had an ear to listen heard it and they agree that it was them as well. But the reality is that when I really sit down and look at it, there was a part that I played, and I needed to hold myself to a standard. I needed to hold myself to a particular, manner of behavior and conduct. And because I kind of just went in there all willy nilly, not willy nilly acting crazy, right? But because I didn't have a bar The times that I fell below, I didn't even catch because there was no bar. So yeah, anyway, work, you can also exhibit some cognitive dissonance there as well, especially when you have teammates and colleagues where they are clearly acting a fool. But you can also be in a space where you make some mistakes and you fall from grace as well, and you kind of just need to get it together. So that is just another example that I have seen cognitive dissonance play out in my life that I had to catch on the back end, and I'm definitely going to be a little bit more aware of that moving forward in the future. And last but not least, cognitive dissonance in my life with my own life goals. Okay, y'all, because we are always striving for better. We are always pushing for greater heights in life. But the reality is sometimes we be tripping. Like sometimes we set such high goals, and some of this might just be me, but sometimes I specifically will set a goal, and maybe it's just so high that I just, I get to step two and I'm like, all right, I need to take a break. And so then I'm inconsistent. I start blaming outside things, people, events, and I stop really pushing myself to get to where I'm trying to get to. And it's a mixed bag of things, right? When you're trying to accomplish your life goals. So it's not always just cognitive dissonance, but I'm talking about, being very clear about, just my own responsibility to stay motivated and stay true and stay committed to what I said I was going to do, because when you can't do it for yourself, then that shows up in other areas when you're supposed to be committed to other people and other things and other places and other spaces. And again, like I said, this is a mixed bag of things, so it's not just cognitive dissonance that kind of keeps us from really going after our dreams and really hitting our dreams hard. But yes, the reality is that sometimes I would tell myself that, when I get this, then I'll work out. When I'm this, then I will save money. And you just cannot be like that because made a mistake, or you didn't, do the things that you were supposed to do or that you said you were going to do. And all of the reasons for why, the excuses and etc. are valid, but at the end of the day, you're the number one person that is in control of you and what you put forth. And so there's nothing really stopping you from doing it today. There's nothing really stopping you from making consistent, gradual, even if they're small steps in the right direction. And so, trust me, you guys, this is one of those ones, like, I'm saying it to y'all and I'm like, ooh, deep sigh, because I'm constantly working on this. I'm constantly having to push myself and tell myself that I need to get it together and that I really need to focus and buckle down. But yeah, I definitely experienced a lot of cognitive dissonance with achieving my own life goals, whether it be, saving money and not impulsively spending, because I'm a huge impulsive spender. But or whether it be working out and fitness and things like that. There's definitely cognitive dissonance at play when I miss a day of working out, or when I am supposed to be saving, but I blow all my money on this. I make excuses. Oh, it's okay. Like, I'll make it right back. Or, oh, it's okay. Like, it's just one day that I ate a burger, that I didn't go to the gym. We always make excuses. And look, this is a bigger conversation, right? So this is another thing. I don't want to get too heavily into the money conversation because I'm going to have an episode about that coming up. And health and fitness, I'm going to have an episode about that coming up. But the reality is, when we make those types of excuses, instead of embracing the faults or the mistake for what it is, apologizing to ourselves for making the mistake, and accepting it, embracing it, and finding ways to, correct the mistake and move forward and not, ruminate on it for too long. That is the biggest, I guess, error or flaw, right? You don't want to stay stuck in, ruminating, right? But you also don't want to just make excuses for yourself either. Even something as small as forgetting to go to the gym or not feeling like going to the gym. Apologize to yourself, acknowledge the wrong, understand why you didn't do it, what went wrong, and just try again tomorrow. But ignoring it, justifying it, rationalizing it is going to get you nowhere. So I'm still working on that, guys. Please pray for me and bear with me. It is definitely something that I need some work on. So, yeah. The reality is that life is full of silent negotiations, something that you kind of have to do with yourself as well as others. You have to give a little in order to get a little, and you always have to be in a space of understanding what the other person wants and evaluating the reality that giving that person what they want doesn't necessarily mean that you lose, right? Giving that person power does not actually mean that you lose power, even if it feels that way. Same thing with compromise. How you do it is actually a very layered process, and it really does depend on the person you're interacting with. And so I won't say it's so much layered as it is subjective. Each individual situation is different. Compromise takes two people. So it's not just you every single time, like I said earlier, being the bigger person, but you do have to come from a space where you're willing and open enough to get to somewhere, to really find a common ground and reach a common ground. And it's okay to do that. It's okay to, in the art of compromise, I was wrong here, you were wrong there. Let's meet somewhere in the middle with how to resolve this. So just kind of take all of that in stride as you continue to navigate your own journey of understanding that you are the problem. And so, guys, I just wanted to, as always, leave you with a little Bible verse. I am not going to read this whole verse because, like I said, I don't want this episode to end up being a two-parter like our Choosing Joy series. And we have almost come to a close, but I have an incredible verse that I want you guys to check out, and I'm just going to read some of it, even though the entire chapter is extremely spot on with everything that we've been talking about. It comes from Romans 14, 1 through 23. So I guess that's the entire chapter, Romans 14. But I'm just going to read the first couple of passages where it says, accept other believers who are weak in faith and don't argue with them about what they think is right or wrong. For instance, one person believes it's all right to eat anything, but another believer with a sensitive conscience will only eat vegetables. Those who feel free to eat anything must not look down on those who do not, and those who don't eat certain foods must not condemn those who do, for God has accepted them both. Who are you to condemn someone else's servant? Their own master will judge whether they stand or fall, and with the Lord's help, they will all stand and receive his approval. So it goes on to give some other examples and really just explain the importance of letting God be the judge of, who is doing right and who is doing wrong, because sometimes we do get way too caught up in what we think is right and what we think is wrong. Again, holding on to these super strong, firm beliefs and telling everybody that they are wrong and rationalizing and justifying why we are right. And the reality is, you can have these strongly held beliefs, and that's wonderful, but you also have to accept that other people may not. And it doesn't mean that you have to double down and make people feel bad about themselves. And just, your focus is to make sure that you are honoring the Lord and living a life that is a good one and is pleasing to the Lord, And, obviously you can talk to your friends, you can, conversate with people about differing views and things like that. All of that is healthy. There are other verses that talk about this. But verse 10 of this specific thing, Romans 14, verse 10 says, so why do you condemn another believer? Why do you look down on another believer? Remember, we will all stand before the judgment seat of God. So I'm big on this because, again, I know there are verses that talk about, when you see a believer going in the wrong direction, it is your job to have that conversation with them. But I believe that that has to be done in love and that has to be done in private. That is my own personal belief. Um, you know, Private versus public is definitely subjective and opinionated. But I think it actually makes sense, especially when you see verses like this that say that it's not our job to condemn, only God condemns. And so judging someone and essentially telling them that their lifestyle is wrong, it's not something for us to make the call about. And this is actually as important as literally anything else. I know that the verse is just talking about vegetables, but there were certain foods, especially back in the earlier Old Testament of the Bible, that you weren't supposed to eat. You weren't supposed to touch. God was very specific about what you were supposed to eat as a Israelite, and this was going to set you apart. And so he's saying the same thing now in the New Testament, explaining that it's not about that. It's about how you're going to honor the Lord. And when it comes to these specific details, God will make those decisions. The ultimate judge, he will make those decisions. So that's kind of an aside, right? A more specific aspect of understanding that you are the problem, but it's kind of harping on the reality that you your core beliefs and your core values are your core beliefs and your core values. And the fact that somebody else does not accept them is absolutely okay. And so if you are a Christian, if you are a believer, which if you are not, I'm going to be praying for you, obviously. And that is okay one way or the other. This podcast is absolutely still for you. But if you are a believer, it is absolutely your responsibility to be open enough to allow for other people to live their lives in the manner that they see fit, so long as that manner is still in their heart and mind glorifying to God. Another verse that I wanted to share with you guys very quickly is 2 Timothy 2 and 4, which just says, no soldier gets entangled in civilian pursuits, since his aim is to please the one who enlisted him. No one serving as a soldier gets entangled in civilian affairs, but rather tries to please his commanding officer. So that is a verse that's also pretty much saying the same thing, is that civilian affairs, we're technically all civilians, right? We're not in the military, but civilian affairs are kind of, I think this verse is trying to help us understand that civilian affairs are kind of like the mundane, like trivial matters, like they're not highly technical, highly specialized matters. At least they're typically not. So it's not really our responsibility to get caught up in that. Like, we're supposed to be up here dealing with the technical, highly specialized things. Let's worry about that. We can talk about that. Maybe we're talking about spiritual warfare. Maybe we're talking about things that are on a more a high level, like the souls being saved and making sure that people are hearing the gospel. But talking about things that are just like, they're not that deep. Like, let it go. It's pretty much saying let it go. Like, don't hold a grudge. Don't get caught up over it. I understand that it may be important to you right now, but I promise you it's not that deep. That's pretty much what this verse is saying. And I know that it feels important to you right now, but I promise you it's not that deep. So just kind of also sticking within that same vein of, hey, bring it down. It's okay to apologize. It's okay to let it go. And of course, the Bible kind of reminding us of all the reasons why that is the case. As we know, some of you may not know, but some of us know, there are several verses. Well, maybe not several verses, but there are passages in the Bible that talk about turning the other cheek, the importance of turning the other cheek. If a man slaps you, you turn the other cheek. Essentially saying that if someone does you wrong, you give them the other cheek to do you wrong. which is not to say that you just let people beat up on you and let them, do whatever they want with you, but it's just not that deep. It's really just not. Like, stop being so offended all the time. You know, if that's your thing, that's what you do. Maybe you get away from that person, um, if they really are hurting you. But come on, stop being so offended. It's not that serious. And other verses talking about the importance of forgiveness, which we dove into in a previous episode. I can't remember what episode that was. Forgiveness is absolutely a huge, huge key. It will open doors for you. It will open new perspectives for you. Relationships will be restored and certain ones will be let go. But it gives you the real power that you need to be the you that you need to be, um, in so many different facets and areas of your life. So anyway, I would stop rambling about that. But yeah, the Bible is pretty clear on this particular topic and the fact that we're not supposed to hold grudges. We're not supposed to be quick to anger and turning the other cheek and just kind of staying away from petty arguments and just having this kind of disposition of, anger and resentment and blame. That's just not supposed to be your MO. So, if anything, guys, I hope that some of the things that you can take away from this conversation, you will take away that we should always be evaluating the reality that we might be wrong, especially when our viewpoints or the actions stemming from our viewpoints are hurting other people. So if somebody has been hurt, it's not like it is honestly horrible for you to just kind of turn your nose up and just walk the other way like you don't see it. That's horrible, right? But it's also like even if you are the type of person to comfort somebody and they're hurt, you don't want to be comforting them from a, well, as long as you just learn your lesson from this, you need to really just do better. No, 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 no. Sometimes you have to take on that, even if they, were also wrong. Sometimes you have to take on the reality that you could share in some of the blame and really sit with yourself and understand how, when, if you have hurt someone else, you could also be a part of the problem. And, the other thing I think is a good takeaway from this is when you feel yourself getting offended or riled up after something, it is the perfect time to just pause and not only reevaluate the anticipated reaction, but the hurt feelings themselves and how certain triggers may have brought them on. So, obviously, sometimes we are so riled up that it's hard to stop, but it's a practice. So it will not always be perfect. It may not always be right away. But because I believe that today is the day that you are gaining a new awareness about some of these things, and you're going to really begin to embrace some of the ways that you can kind of like, okay, hold up, let me just take a beat for a sec. I'm praying for you that you will be able to take those pauses, find a second to calm down, but not just calm down, but really use that time to that you're calming down in an effective way. And like I said, reevaluate whatever this reaction is that you were about to have and why you were about to have it. Understand the feelings that are connected with the reaction that you're about to have. What are you about to try to justify your actions, rationalize your actions, and why are you about to do that? Um, and then are you triggered, by something that someone did or said that is causing you to feel this way? And if so, why? Just really starting to think about some of the things you do and why you do them, because that is the goal of our foundational series, understanding ourselves, re inventing, reconfiguring this foundation so that we can have a really strong, solid one that's rock solid, to stand on as we build on top of it and go into greater spaces in our lives. So, yes, guys, I love you. This was an amazing episode. I am so excited for our launch coming up in May. I honestly can't believe we're already here for the real deal. And I hope that you guys will continue to show love to the podcast. Do not forget to follow the podcast at Carved Wellness on Instagram. That is the only social media platform that we are on right now. When that changes, I will let you know. Please send me a DM, send me a message or whatever to just let me know that you guys are vibing with your girl, you're loving the podcast, or that you want to shout out, or you have questions, if you want to be featured on the podcast, if you want to be a special guest on the podcast, send me a DM at Carved Wellness on IG, and I will definitely do what I need to do to get you included in the podcast on one of our upcoming episodes. So, yes, guys, the next series we're starting is the relationship series. I am not going to tell you anything else about what to expect about that. You're just going to have to see it for yourself. Just know that it's going to be good. It's going to be amazing, and you're going to love it. But the series is going to be starting with the launch of the podcast. So that is on May 1st as well. Guys, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to share this episode, please. And all the others that you have favorites, with friends, families, loved ones, people who you think could benefit from this. Okay? All right, guys, I love you so much, and I will see you on launch